All right. How we doing? Mic is working. Good. All right then, it's around 7:05. I'd like to call this meeting of the Norfolk Board of Health to order on May the 3rd. The first item on the agenda is a continuation, actually, of a conversation from the last meeting, and it concerns a nitrogen aggregation plan for Norway Farms. And I see that we have the owner of the property here, and I see we have his engineer here. Who goes first? The engineer.
I can start. Rick Goodrow with United Consultants. Since our last meeting, we've had an opportunity to go through the regulations. We've had an opportunity to talk with Wade on a few different occasions. And I do have a copy of the Town of Norfolk Water Quality Report for 2016, which I can provide you a copy of. We can get Wade a copy as well.
Thank you.
We had some discussions with the Town of Norfolk Water Department, Mr. Al Finney, with respect to the results of the annual testing that are done on the municipal wells. I believe it's 2.66 is the nitrate level that was observed in the report. So we're below the 5 milligrams per liter threshold, where we could then be triggered into having a situation where we could have on-site treatment necessary to reduce from 10 to 5 milligrams per liter. We do have a letter from the board's consultant. Don't know if the board members have had an opportunity to look at that letter.
Yeah. Well, we just came today.
Yes.
We've
Sorry,
taken a look at it.
it's short though.
It is. It's, well, do you want to pass it over to Wade, because he has sent us this letter?
Yes.
And do you want to give us the sort of the non-quoting of CMR, but just the essence of what you want to say?
Sure. Last time the project was before the board, you requested that the applicant come back with a site-specific mass balance analysis. And looking at the aggregate flows of nitrogen loading guidelines to the state, the mass specific site-specific mass balance analysis is typically for a facility that has a discharge of 2,000 gallons or more. Facility being one unit or under one ownership, having a septic system serving it with 2,000 gallons or above, discharging into the ground. And that type of facility is the type of facility that you could request for the mass balance. What we have here tonight, we have multiple facilities being homes in the subdivision. Each of the on-site septic systems are under 2,000 gallons per day, and they're on individual ownership lots. So it doesn't fall underneath the mass balance analysis request. And what I wrote into the letter to the board was a definition of facility through Title V, and Title V does address nitrogen aggregation in regard to single ownership for purposes of determining whether total design flows exceed the 2,000 gallons per day threshold of 310 CMR 15-202. So the state is aware of subdivisions and multiple systems that would discharge that could affect the groundwater on Zone 2s. But there are cases where if each of the lots are individually owned, on the subdivision, each individually owned, they are exempt from this balance calculation. If each of those lots were not individually owned, say there's a condo association, and they had one system under one control over 2,000 gallons per day, then you're able to ask them for a mass balance calculation.
Maybe there are questions for you. I have one, and that is, you say in your letter that the analysis is only applicable, and then you described the situation where it is. But what prevents it from actually being applied, even if you have a dispersed number of septic systems, infiltrating the groundwater with whatever they're, letting go out of their systems? In terms of the actual, engineering of the site, what's the difference in terms of still doing a calculation?
Ownership. And also, if you look at
Not
the,
ownership, but the
oh.
molecules underground don't know who owns them.
I know,
So
but-
I'm just asking the question, once you get this material into the ground and you're trying to assess its impact on adjacent property,
Right.
who cares ultimately in terms of the impact?
oh,
Who
okay,
owned the nitrate molecule or ion to start with?
land dilution takes care of the individual septic systems that are under individual ownership. As I stated later on my letter, the exemption goes with a subdivision with individual ownership. Each system is under 2,000 gallons per day, and also it's in compliance with Title V. The applicant is going before the Board of Health for Title V compliance through the aggregate nitrogen recognition. And the way he's going through it is having each bedroom being supported with 10,000 square feet of land. And he's doing it through facility land and non-facility land by showing open space. So he is performing the dilution that you're talking about of the physical aspect of amount of gallons per day of going into the ground. What's the difference between a single ownership or multiple ownerships? Is that the multiple ownerships is credited through the land dilution factor, where, and it's also many of them, different ones spread out. And if you look at the example that the state gives for the single facility with 2,000 gallons per day, it's a one soil absorption system. It's not multiple ones, it's one. And he stated as a single facility that receives, or that discharges 2,000 gallons per day. Like the medical building on Pond Street it was an example of one. One facility with one leaching facility that was over 2,000 gallons per day.
So, we brought this up
Yeah.
because we were concerned about the effects on the budding residents. So then there is no way that we can,
No, of course there is.
Okay,
If I
good.
could, Tom.
ahead.
I was a little caught off guard by the letter. Under 15.216.5 facility aggregate plans is what you're talking about. Item C is any condition that the approving authority, being us, deems appropriate. And at that last discussion that we had, if you look back in the minutes, we talked about it. We are the stewards of the groundwater, and we thought, and we pointed out what we called would be sensitive receptors, being the wells. And we actually took a vote to require the mass balance equation. So this is not a matter of what was literally in the Title V. It was invoking item C, any condition that we approved, the approving authority deemed appropriate, and that's what we decided on. So that's why I was surprised that it came back like this.
And on the same day too, I do apologize. It was just coming up. It's, if you go into the guidelines, it doesn't recognize, I mean, you can request it.
Well, it's not a request, it's the condition that we deemed appropriate. And that's what we had a discussion on last meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Rick.
So, we attempted to do a mass balance analysis, which I have a plan of, trying to utilize the calculations in the regulations. The difficulty is we have 12 separate leaching areas, but we went through the exercise just so that we would have something to discuss. And we did go over this with the agent in the field when we were doing some soil testing. So what you're seeing is the entirety of the development. The area encapsulated in red is the 14 lots that are being proposed, as well as some of the open space. We've done the calculation on the right-hand side of the page. We calculated the open space lot septic systems, and we also calculated the lawn area that would be proposed in this development. Some of the wooded areas, we've eliminated the asphalt and impervious areas from the calculation. We did not take any credit for the roof recharge systems that are being proposed, nor do we take any credit for the groundwater recharge that's being proposed with respect to the stormwater system for the roadway itself. And we also did not include any of the bordering vegetated wetlands of the pond on the site. And as I said, we ran the calculations based on a true acre of 43,560 square feet, as opposed to a Title V acre of 40,000 square feet, which would be a little more advantageous to us. And with all that coming out, you can see that with this area, this parameters, that we've attempted to take the state regulation, which has, again, one site, one septic system, in a way, in interpreting that and trying to apply it to 12 septic systems. And you can see that our number, that the result would be 9.62.
That's a
Below the
milligram
10.
per liter.
Yes.
And does
Nitrate?
does that take into account what you gave us as the background level of the 2.66, that water?
Does not.
Does that need to be taken into
I
account?
believe it does. I think the 2.66 is a measure of the town's drinking water supply. If that level was more than 5 milligrams per liter, this board could then ask us to have a discharge of less than 5.
So this is based on a well that is compared to this location, do you know where that is? Or is
I'm
this-
sorry, what's
Is
that?
is this on a drinking water well result, or is this just a water test result?
The
2 point-
results I gave you earlier,
the
that's from the
2.66.
town's wells.
Just from, is that from a well that's in this area, or
That is from the town's drinking water, Gold Street well, I'm assuming.
Gold Street well?
The Gold Street well. I mean, the town only has 2 drinking water wells, areas that I'm aware of,
Gold and spruce.
that the town owned.
There's also spruce.
Bruce and Gold Street, yes. There are other public, privately owned public drinking water supply wells in the town, but I believe the town of Norfolk only, I think there's more than one well at Gold Street, but it's
Okay.
considered one well for the purposes of this.
So, right now, the drinking water has 2.66 milligrams per liter of nitrogen, and you don't have to take action as long as it's below 5.
Correct.
The town. But when you add 9.62, I don't know, how does that fit into the,
Well, that's at our down gradient boundary. We didn't even analyze this to the sensitive receptors of the neighboring wells. We just stopped at the bordering vegetated wetland. Because you're dealing with rainwater dilution on open space areas, amongst other things. That's a big factor into this equation that's being looked at. So there really is no rainwater infiltration occurring in Crestbrook Pond or in the bordering vegetated wetlands on the site. So that's why there's a difficulty in trying to assess the state, formulas to this specific site.
So I would say we have what we were asking for, we just have to have it reviewed and approved.
Yeah, I wish I knew how to interpret that number, because it seems a lot worse than it should be, given the fact you got an awful lot of area here.
And it's not actually at the downstream receptor, it's at the property line, right? Is that at the property line?
It's at the BVW or the property line.
Right.
It's the extent of the red.
Right.
So there's that one little finger that juts out on the other side of the wetlands.
So that's, the mass balance is taken at what we deemed a receptor. So, like I said, it just has to be reviewed.
did you
Maybe
also?
it does work.
Do I recall something about there would be no nitrogen fertilizers used on this property? Do I remember that?
This, we did not mention that, but the formula requires us to provide for a nitrogen from fertilizer on the lawn areas.
So
That's
that-
built into this equation. So that's a part 2 of the first part of the equation is the fertilizer.
Is that something that we could ask for? That they,
All we'll just have to have it peer reviewed, that's all. I mean, if they did it the right way, it could very well be fine. We're not in a position right now at this hearing to review and
Okay.
approve it, that's all
Okay.
I'm saying.
Well, I'm not the engineer, so I have no idea what to make of this number. It's less than 10, which is good, but what does it really mean in terms of impact downstream?
More of if the equation was applied correctly. And that's kind of what the whole idea of the peer review is about, you know? It's not for us to try to determine this right now in front of us. I'm not even sure if the equation's applied correctly. It very well could be, you know? And that's the idea of getting the peer review done.
So can I make a motion? Can I make a motion that?
We don't need we already had a motion back in the last hearing.
Well, the motion was for the analysis to be done, and it's been done. And now we need an interpretation of what this number means to us. You haven't seen this have you seen this before?
Yes, I have seen it before, yes. Are we talking
So
about?
what is your take on 9.62 as a number, a boundary?
Well, it's taken from, if you look at figure 3, they do have an example of the 10 milligrams per liter standard is met, and they have the proposed project, and they talk about the design flow, and the applicant added up all the gallons per day, and then he added up the lawn square area, and then he did the impact area, and then he also did the calculation of loading the wastewater and the lawn fertilizer, which is put into it, and he came up with under 10 millimeters per liter.
Yeah.
So it does work. I mean, and we did discuss about it, that the calculations seem to work, because what the application here is more of land dilution, 10,000 square feet per bedroom, and he also used the calculation, it still showed us less than 10 millimeters per liter going to meeting at the end of the property line. So that was a good thing. They seemed to match each other. The land dilution versus the calculation seemed to fit
Yeah, I
with
believe,
the project itself, so it was good.
didn't we talk that the downstream receptor, that sensitive receptor was going to be the wells, and those
They were
adjacent well?
Private wells on Medway and also
And
on
this
Lake
goes
Street.
to the edge of the credit land, not the well, as far as the mass balance goes.
Right, the mass balance is required at the edge of the property line. So it would
Or is
be,
that the downstream sensitive receptor we pulled out, which is the wells?
the wells are beyond the property line.
Right, but that's the downstream sensitive receptor we talked about.
Correct, that would be correct.
Right, so does this do that?
Yes, it would do. Actually, I think it even does even more because the Crystal Lake is an open body of water. You have a lot of mixtures of the weather mixtures. You have turnovers in the spring and the summer. You have wind, you have evaporation, you have amount of dilution of anything.
But are you, and you're confident in saying that now, that this takes into account the formula correctly, and it takes into all parameters, and that you're okay with this design?
Oh, I'm okay with the proposal for aggregate nitrogen loading, yes, because I'm looking at it also as land dilution.
So you're saying, based on the downstream sensitive receptors, that as presented, you're willing to say this complies with that standard? You don't need-
With what the state's intent, yes. I just think having to do a site analysis, balance analysis, it might be difficult, and it might not be true to the sense of what they mean by the calculation.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, but doing the mass doing the mass balance analysis calculation as presented in the guidelines, it's, in this project here, it won't work. It doesn't work, because you have multiple systems. But if you look at this project as a land dilution, it works. And if you use the calculation or the example of the do for the calculation, it also works too. So one's balanced, one's showing that the land dilution also works as well as the calculation. So it's kind of like an interesting exercise.
Right, and I know we talked last time about potential for talking to DEP to make sure this was correctly assessed.
Correct. I read the guidelines, and it's pretty clear. It's dealing with a single
No, not that part.
facility. Okay.
That part's out the window. We already said we want it
Okay.
done. It's more, is this correctly taken into account if we're going to do it? Has this been applied correctly?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you can give us a letter even after the fact that you're okay with this?
I'm giving it to you right now verbally.
Right.
I'm not the applicant to the town, but, I am giving you advice, because that's what I'm being paid for.
Well, that's what we're asking, is for
Yeah,
you to
it sounds like you're
react
trying to make me
to
like-
what the applicant has provided us.
Do I
And
want
your
to-
reaction to it is that it makes the case.
Yes,
that
it makes
this
the
will
case,
not have an
yes.
impact.
Yeah. I think
Downstream.
going, yes.
And do we need, are you, as a sanitarian, you're okay reviewing this for the calcs?
Yes,
sure.
yes, yeah.
Well, okay.
But I'm-
Last time we took a vote. He did the calculation as requested. These are the results. Our sanitarian says the calculation is acceptable. So,
There's no other way that you can do any tests beyond this, what did we call it again, site?
Well, I mean,
well, the only test,
Plan.
the
I mean,
additional
that- this one.
criterion is the size of the land.
Right.
the only thing I'm
And that's
comfortable
what
with is
this
that
calculation's based on.
typically we have this submitted to our office and reviewed and a letter given out. Now we're getting it kind of, and I understand it could be correct, but we're getting it delivered to the hearing. We're getting a verbal okay. It's just not the way we usually do it.
Well, it would be good to have a covering or a follow-up in a very short letter, if you want to make it very short, simply
Because my-
indicating
because
that
my
you
ri- because my
have looked
ri-
at these calculations and
Because my original
they seem to be correct.
letter to the board was shown an approval of the project through the.
Based
land
on this
deletion.
plan?
Based on this plan with land deletion, yes.
So was this submitted to the office, this plan?
This is the subdivision plan. That's.
No, this mass balance.
The colored-up sketch you have tonight was not submitted to the
Right.
Board of Health office. We had given
No.
Wade a copy in the field, but we did not deliver it to the office.
But the subdivision itself is still the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, no, I'm-
Yeah, and the,
I'm
and the
saying
land,
this.
and the credit land is still the same. Yeah, I mean, that's how should I put that?
Right,
I don't need,
this
I
actual
personally don't
mass
need,
balance
I
equation.
personally don't need colored pictures, but yeah, I appreciate it, but figure it out too.
What we should do, obviously, is addend this to the
Now-
submission that we have, and then a response back from you saying you've reviewed the calculations that we see here and are in agreement with the,
Rick, can you submit this to the office? Yeah, just make an official submittal to the office.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that said, unless Fran has,
No. If we've done everything that we can do to ensure the residents downstream that their wells are going to
He
be,
has
is
calculated
what
out in
we
the
can
field.
do.
Well, okay, gentlemen, well,
I just want to be, you're okay with it? You're okay.
well, the first application that came for the board showed that they met the 10,000 square feet per bedroom. They met it.
well, in some respects, the
And the
calculation that was
plan-
done here is simply a reinforcement
It's a
of what
it's
was
reinforcement for
originally
the very
submitted.
first time it came before you, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because nothing's changed. The lots haven't changed, the land hasn't changed,
The only thing, I
configuration
just want to make
hasn't
sure
changed.
that it's
It's
one
just-
time probably already, that, you know, we asked for a mass balance at that downstream receptor, and you're okay with it.
I understand, and I also said in my letter too that the mass balance on this type of.
I know it doesn't say it's
Doesn't
required by law,
apply.
but we required it.
I realize you required it, but there's,
Well, if we
Doesn't
required it,
meet
it just
the
has to be
guidelines.
executed correctly, that's all I'm saying.
I can look, yeah, fine.
So,
All right.
Motion to
All right.
accept the facility the facility aggregation plan. Let me get the project name.
But just for my own, it wasn't given to me out in the field, it was given to me when I was in my office too. I received more of a.
Email it to him.
Yeah, he emailed it, it was more of a very, I saw the numbers then, I looked at it, so fine. And I actually told the applicant, this is just reconfirming what's already been shown. So.
For the
For the
aggregate
orig-
plan, not for the
for the
mass
aggregate-
balance.
For the aggregate plan, which
Right.
is part of the mass balance. I mean, no, it's all together. It's just one way of presenting it to
Well,
the
there should be
town.
some kind of connection, or otherwise there's a problem somewhere in the whole
Yeah,
engineering
there is a
philosophy.
It's
connection.
different between the boundary line and the point, is what.
Sure,
that's-
no, I'm saying, but they ought to be consistent at some point. If one is working, the other one ought to be working, but now we have data to suggest indeed that it will be working. If the model works, it should show up in the kind of calculation that we're seeing here, and indeed it does.
Yeah. One's showing you numbers in nitrogen, and one's showing you numbers in land, square
Right.
footage of land.
Right, the model and then the
And the
calculation.
square footage of land is.
I got it.
Our
All right,
consultant
That
has
has been a-
approved it. I have a motion to accept the facility nitrogen aggregate loading plan for the Norway Farms open space development.
I second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, I appreciate the trust. It sounds,
Thank you.
All right, Rick, all right,
At
Bob.
what point do we do the deed restriction and easement?
If the board's comfortable with it, they can execute it.
Do you have ones already signed by Rob? Or,
Maybe we could, nobody could sign it now, it's like, well, I would suggest that that be reviewed and everyone's, I don't know if it has been reviewed yet.
You mean this right here?
yeah,
Yeah, let's review it because some of the lots is OS1 and
Okay.
OS2. And just this.
all right,
All right,
sounds good.
thank you.
All right, thank you, folks. On to our next item.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you, good night.
Take care.
Yeah, we're gonna just look it over and make sure that all the, you know, the dates and the lot numbers are correct.
Perfect.
I'll have you come in and sign it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda is a variance hearing. And this is for 3 Norwell Street.
Yeah.
One second, I've got to read you a preamble to all this, which goes like this. A variance hearing from Board of Health Regulations is called to order for 3 Norwell Street. It is my duty to inform you that you've got to provide the board with data to support your request for a waiver from our regulations, and that if you don't receive the waiver, it will do you manifest injustice. You've also got to show that what you intend to do is environmentally acceptable. I'll assume you heard all that.
I got a couple right here, too.
So, yeah, do we have a plan to look at?
Gotta get these.
Okay. So please introduce yourself and explain the project.
Good evening. My name is Don Seberg. I'm with Gloucester Engineering. You usually see John, but he had another meeting tonight. So the project is on 3 Norwell Street. They did a couple test pits out here. John did a couple test pits with Wade. They had high groundwater. So the variance is basically they had to send out, they couldn't do a perk test. So they sent the samples out for a sieve analysis. Both the analysis came back, there was loamy sand and sand. So they designed a precipice on those with a loading rate of 0.66. The system is up 3 feet from the groundwater based on if it even was a 2-minute perk. It's designed on an 8-minute perk. And so they situated right here. You know, they did an additional test pit out front, which came back, it was no good. They determined that was not useless. So this was the only spot for it. That's basically it in a nutshell.
So your request is only for a variance to deal with the idea of using soil
It's the soil, yes.
permeability as opposed to doing a perk test?
Yeah.
All their setbacks and everything else are
Everything
okay?
else is fine.
So, Wade, you have a letter to us,
Yep.
which would you like to summarize?
Sure. It summarizes that work was done on the property. The backyard was tested for site analysis. Groundwater was weeping out at certain depths where the percolation tests would have been performed. Because of the silt loam layer that's right underneath the top and subsoil, the water's weeping out of it. The engineer wasn't able to do any perk tests. So we went ahead and did sieve analysis. He grabbed 2 samples of it, brought it to a lab. And what that does, it breaks down the soil into silt, sand, and clay, and it's percentages wise, and that percentage turns it into a type of class 1, class 2, class 3 soils. With that certain class, the state has a policy where long-term acceptance rates are determined if it's a class 1, class 2, or class 3, compacted, non-compacted. In this case, it came as a non-compacted class 1 soils. And the engineer designed accordingly with the long-term acceptance rate of
Actually, 0.66.
Thank you, 0.66. Oh, there it is right there.
Yeah, it's in your letter, too.
Yeah, I know, I
You
just.
had it once.
I know, I was looking at it right here. And so he designed it, used the Presby system, and that's a innovative alternative system. And with these IA systems, that's the good abbreviation for it, you have already approvals from the state level. They allow you to do things with these certain designs. And this particular design, the Presby, and a few other ones, they look at this as a treatment, a pre-treatment in the leaching facilities to allow encroachment to groundwater. And their maximum encroachment would be 2 feet. This design's 3 feet plus, so that's good. And the groundwater elevation we saw in the backyard allowed the Presby system not to be a mound system. Before we left, we did go in the front to see what the soils looked like, and they were worse than they were in the back. Groundwater was actually higher, and it just wasn't worth, the engineer didn't want to pursue it because of the setbacks of the property line, the foundation, and the water service. So he decided to go in the back, which was more advantageous for the homeowner because the sewer line's also going in the back. Reviewing this, everything looks pretty good. Reviewing this would be the cover over the septic tank. And it seems to be a little bit of a bump. And I just noticed it, putting it out there, because with a little bit of a bump, you got water, surface water running off the bump. Whoops, and then you got top and subsoil and silt loam underneath it, so the water doesn't penetrate in the ground that fast. And I'm just concerned about if there's a lot of rush, a lot of rainfall coming down, that the water could run towards the house, maybe get caught between a bulkhead and a foundation, or even the grading from that higher grade coming out might even affect the wooden deck legs. This is one-dimensional, so sometimes it's difficult to pitch it. Or if you look at it one-dimensional, because that looks okay, when you're out there, the contractor's trying to follow the elevation, and it just brings the grade out, and you might bury a leg or something. But I brought that out. Wasn't sure if John would be here tonight or not, if you can make a comment on it.
Have you discussed this with John, this issue of the grading around the mound?
I have not, but I'm looking at it right now. I think they're just trying to get the minimum cover over the tank.
Oh, yeah, I realize that.
Tank is kind of set. If you want us, I don't think we can really move too much around on that. They can perhaps pitch it a little bit better. I mean, you can, as a condition of approval, just make sure that it's pitched away from the house.
Because if you look at it, it's 99.47, and you're going towards the house, it's a lower grade. So, so.
And there's a bulkhead right there, too.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes like a boxed-in area, so there's nowhere to go. So there's nowhere to go. It might be, it's minimal, it's not that much, but it's enough, you know.
There's a small pitch to it, you can see on the spot grades from the house to the, we got 98.69 and 98, it's basically flat, what you're saying.
It's a little pitch going away from the house, but still,
yeah.
it's puddling.
Yeah.
So,
Can you push the tank out further?
you can push it out a little farther,
If you
yeah.
push it out further, then you could have almost like a little swale between the tank and the foundation.
Yeah, we could do that. There's a little room there that, yes, because we can come straight across.
Just push it straight out.
Yeah.
Suggestion? Should be in this business.
Thinking about it. Yeah, sounds fun.
Used to let the engineer, he does have some room to bring the system down a little bit, because he does have 2 feet to groundwater. So if he wanted to, he could maybe drop the system a little bit so it's flat and it's not a.
Well, you've got 3 now, you'd be down to basically the minimums if you went.
Well, the
I don't know, we're only talking about 6 inches.
They classified it as loamy sand per the sieve, right? I mean, the thing I was liking about this, if it was a sand at a 2-minute perk, then we'd have 3 feet allowed per Presby. Right now, he's at 3 feet, so it doesn't even bring that discussion up, you know?
Yeah, but he's not designing it as a less than 2, he's designing it as an 8.
Why is that?
Because
I mean,
because
where is the lab results for the soil?
He's using it as a
Because all I see is a little parenthesis that says loamy sand per sieve. I don't actually see the test results
Sure.
on the plan. They should probably be on there.
I can,
You got it too? Good.
I'm assuming these are the lab.
Right, that's it. I mean, nice to see them on there. I mean, look how, that's right on the sand border between
Yeah, it
lonely
is.
sand and sand. So
right on
you
it.
can make the argument that that might be a less than 2 minute an inch perk. But since he's at 3 feet, how high above the groundwater?
Wait, wait,
3.05.
But let's slow down, but with the sieve analysis, you're not using a physical test out in the field, you're using a laboratory.
Right.
So policy requires that you, whatever classification that comes out from the sieve analysis, you use the worst-case scenario. So it's no longer a less than 2 perk.
Well,
it's
worst
now
case
a-
in this situation is sand, because it's a higher groundwater elevation. So I would definitely make the argument that the worst case in this is 5 feet offset to sand, to groundwater, and not the 8 minute per inch. That's ideal perk rate.
No, I don't think you understand. The policy itself places the design, the long-term acceptance rates as an 8-minute perk rate, not as a 2-minute or less than 2.
For the long-term acceptance rate. I
Which,
understand that,
which
but
sizes up the septic system.
either way, I would say the worst case scenario for this.
So these are regulations, I'm just looking at the regulations logically, because if it's a less than 2, you have a 5-foot, well, in this type of Presby, you have a 3-foot
Right.
separation,
And
which
that's
is
where we're
actually
at now.
showing right now.
Right.
But if you have a greater than 5-minute perk rate, then you're allowed to go to 2. So now the design is, it's required it's an 8-minute because of the sieve analysis, and then do you grab all the other requirements under that as part of the design? I don't know, it's.
The most,
that just get kind of
the way,
confusing.
the most conservative,
I mean, you gotta set,
most conservative perk rate is the less than 2, because it make changes to groundwater elevation difference. But as it stands right now, we're at 3 already, so I don't
Right.
think
We've already
we're
done the
arguing a
perk.
point that
Done
doesn't
both,
matter.
yeah.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter because it's already there. If you
Correct.
push the tank out a little bit and you can swale it from both ways,
Yeah, we can certainly do.
Sound like a plan, Ray? Wayne,
I'm sorry?
you okay with what we're talking about here?
Well, yeah, I'd like to see if they can do it, if they can, if it's workable, because now they're working with, 0.05 feet.
you got an extra 0.05 feet to.
I can
Why would
down an inch.
No, they could,
I mean, so that's your only concern, is the cover over the grading back there. Everything
It
else
doesn't
is
grade
fine.
to the
it
foundation. right.
doesn't make a bump in the backyard and the people own the house have a drainage problem going towards their foundation.
Yeah,
And because underneath the top and subsoil, you get silt loam.
yeah.
The water's gonna sit there for a while. And I'm not even sure where the downspouts are.
So you're at 98.63 at the corner, right?
Yeah, 98.69 and 90.
We don't know how much is exposed for the foundation. there,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not, foundation is,
Well, you're on a wood deck, is
Oh,
that? Yeah, you're at the deck there, so you're at 98.59, right, at the
Yeah.
foundation, 99.16 at the bulkhead? So you have a little bit more space to play with there.
we have a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So this could actually come up on the foundation.
Yeah, because you're not out by the deck, you've got the room to grade it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another way, they could put new contours around the house going towards that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm
All
just
right,
not gonna
look,
take
guys,
that,
we're not gonna engineer this tonight.
yeah, I'm not gonna take the responsibility for that.
The only deal here is make sure the grading is away from the foundation, right?
I just have to have them put bigger spot grades, so my eyes are not as good anymore.
All right. All right, if there are no other questions for the applicant, is there a motion to act upon this variance?
Motion to grant variance, let's see this.
Conditions?
Motion to grant the variance for number 3 Norwell Street as presented.
Without any conditions? Like, what are we even talking about?
All right, we can make a condition,
minutes.
conditioned on the fact that surface drainage will be graded away from the existing house foundation.
Yeah, so we give Wade a revised plan that shows it's grading away, and
I second it.
All right, further discussion? No. All those in favor?
All right,
thank you very much.
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Don.
All right. So, let's skip over the minutes. Let's skip over the correspondence. There's a lot of folks here. Has this got to do with Lawrence Street? Okay, let's talk about Lawrence Street.
Talk about Orange Street, this is a good topic.
first of all, as you know, the Zoning Board of Appeals was supposed to have a meeting this week, and that's been continued till June now, apparently. The Board of Health has an interest, certainly, in this particular development, in that I think the rest of the land use boards in town look to the Board of Health for guidance when it comes to preserving the quality of the water under our feet. And certainly there is a concern down there because of the way the land was used in the past, that there's a possibility for contamination, and indeed there is data to show that there is some contamination of the site, the old Buckley and Mann site. Now the question before the House is, what does that have in terms of a possible impact on, well, first of all, the project that's been proposed, but second of all, I'm assuming most of you folks already live in that area, either on Lawrence Street or in the Brett Farm subdivision, and you have interests in the quality of the water in the ground as well. Is there anybody who would like to basically express, if they are feeling able to everybody else who's here, what your concerns are, what they're focused on? Then maybe we can address those concerns as best we are able to. Anybody want to take a swing at this? You will need a microphone so everybody at home can hear what you're having to say. And it'd be good if you introduced yourself as well. Or you could join us at the table. We have nice microphones right up here.
Sandra Myatt on Eric Road, I live. Well, we're a group of residents that have been watching this project for a long time, and some of us are here, but some of us are home watching on TV. And so we're familiar with the history of the site because some of us have lived here and raised our families here for quite a long time. And it's been a very involved project. I'm sure you've looked at some of the papers. So we don't expect you to know everything about it, but there are concerns that we have with the water. And we just wonder what oversight you would have as a board. Are there areas that you're going to ask for further testing? And have you seen some of this contamination? So why don't we start there?
The board has just, like in the last few days, received a report from an engineer working for the applicant, Mr. DePlacido, which disclosed some important data points, contamination of the site from presumably the, well, we don't know exactly where the material is coming from, but there was obviously an industrial site there for many, many years. There are all kinds of stories passed around the neighborhood about materials simply being left, dumped in the ground, covered up, things like that. Are you folks, did you ever walk around the site? I'm assuming many of you have. I actually visited the site just a day ago with the chairman of the planning board. Because it had been a few years. I've been on the Board of Health, well, off and on since 1981. So I've been around during a time when this project was first undertaken. And so it was a refresher for me to go back and take a look at some of the area that you folks, I'm sure, have seen. And if you've been down there, you know this time of the year especially, there is water basically draining through the soil, coming down the hill from where the new subdivision is proposed. And it sort of works its way through the soil, and it comes back above the ground in little streams heading toward the Mill River. And at least a couple of the streams that I saw were fairly heavily discolored with what looks like mostly iron compounds. It's got that distinctive orange color that we associate with iron in the environment. But that also is just the thing you can see. There are other things that we can't see, which may be moving along with the iron that we are seeing. And if you've been down there and seen what I'm talking about, that material is basically flowing away from the site. It is not apparently coming out of this part of the site called the AUL. Now, there is an old, essentially covered up site where material was buried back in the very late 1990s or so. It's a very large area. It looks like it's a very popular area for people that like to ride dirt bikes. But this material that I'm talking about is actually upstream of the AUL. As it moves toward the Mill River and toward the so-called AUL site, gradually that orangish-looking material precipitates out, and what you end up with over time is water getting clearer and clearer, until finally, by the time you get down to the river, it looks pretty natural, which kind of makes sense, because what we're talking about is a precipitation process, and some of the stuff which was in there coming out of the ground initially, over time, settles to the bottom of the streams. But this isn't even the AUL. This is something that's basically on the site in the old industrial area where those slabs are. And I have no idea, frankly. We need to get data to tell us what exactly is under those materials, because that is not something that I have seen data or are aware of testing that tells us what is in the ground, what is producing that discoloration, and what chemicals are in there besides the obvious one, iron. So I think this board is going to be working with the land use boards, the ZBA, Planning Board, Selectmen, Conservation Commission, to come up with a plan for assessing this site in some detail. There is a proposal to basically hire a consultant to essentially design and implement a testing strategy that goes after what we are worried about, not just a sort of standard suite of things that most people always test for, but things that are related to the industrial activity that was taking place at the site years ago. So right now, there has been a request for proposals from consultants to take on this environmental assessment strategy, and proposals have been submitted. And there's going to be a meeting at some point in the fairly near future to examine those proposals and select essentially an expert to be the town's representative in this process, which maybe you've already heard about, but this has been going on for the last couple of weeks, and a decision is going to be made pretty soon. So that's where we are as a board. We haven't really, this is the first time we as a board have had an extended conversation. We had a meeting some time ago with a couple of your neighbors who were more concerned actually about the prospect of blasting as a part of the earth removal process on the upland part of this site to build the Abbeville development. That, I think, was all a concern about possibly contamination from the industrial site getting into the ground, having fissures in the ground perhaps open up as a result of the blasting, and that material working its way toward your wells. The kind of one mitigating factor in all of that is the material, if it's from the industrial site, is essentially downstream of where you all live. Now, that's no guarantee that water from down there can't work its way into cracks and make its way toward you, but it would be a little unusual if it did. As a member of the Board of Health, my concern, and I'd be happy to let others here talk about it, isn't so much with what is happening upstream of this site, but rather what is happening downstream. Because if there is material flowing into those tributaries of the Mill River and then eventually down the Mill River, it is heading toward some important resources in terms of public water supplies. And we need to be very clear on protecting what are likely to be the more targeted kinds of places where this material is flowing. But first of all, we got to find out what's in the ground. And so there is going to be testing done, and there's going to be data to be shared with everybody about what the results of those tests disclose. So we're kind of in an early stage on this most recent look at this site. We went through a cycle, as I say, a couple decades ago, and mostly what came out of that was the development of the so-called AUL. And right now, anyway, as you walk around that large green open space and look for signs of contamination, you don't see visible signs, but there are test holes that have been dug and that are going to be dug to confirm that, well, or hopefully confirm that in fact that material is not having an impact on the quality of the water in the ground. But we need to find that out too. Personally, my own concern is further upstream. I really am worried about what's underground, underneath those old foundations. There's something down there because that water tells us there's something down there, and we need to find out what. Want to add anything, Fran, or-
I mean, I think it's important to note that whoever owns this land now or ends up taking own of it, any development, will own that pollution and the cleanup. That's important to know going forward. I also want to make sure that, I know we got that report just last week, and that was from you, a link that was forwarded on. I want to make sure, as Board of Health and stewards of the groundwater, that we're high up on the hierarchy as far as getting these reports. I mean, was that link given to us, or was that just given to you?
Well, it was given to me, and then I sent it
Okay.
to
I
you
just wanna
all,
make sure
and I
that-
sent
And
it.
then it was provided to me.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we're involved in
loop.
this. It seems like before this slipped through the cracks and everything else, I just want to make sure we're high up there, because since we are looking at the groundwater and the
Yeah, I
controlling
think
it,
that,
so.
that report you're talking about, I think was sent on Thursday.
Yeah,
It
you
was
did
dated the
Friday,
26th, and we got it Friday, so
Yeah, so I
we're,
just want to say it
we
it was
were
directed,
definitely-
just want to make sure it went to the right channel, so we're not relying on, oh, you happened to talk to the planning board, we got this,
no.
Yeah, so we're getting the LSP. We saw the applicant's LSP didn't give a great report. It was actually very bad. It was troubling. So it'll be interesting to see what our town-hired LSP comes back with. And we'll take it from there, really. I mean, obviously, everyone's concerned about that. No one wants this type of site in the town and potentially leaching into the river. So, we're with you.
Just another point.
Wait, here, grab the phone, microphone, please.
I think, Larry Wilson, 22 Lawrence Street. It came to our attention that there was some sort of testing that the owner of the land was supposed to be doing, or some conditions, in terms of either testing or more drilling, and that never occurred. I think that's a concern for us. It's a concern for us in terms of this board, for example. That's your purview, and we don't see you going out and ensuring that these sort of things are taken care of. And this is a big one. This is no small thing. This is a big one. And nobody knew that that testing never occurred. So I think at some level we'd like to know for the future what's going to change so those things are picked up on.
It's a fair question. This project was, we thought, buttoned up 20 years ago. We were mistaken. That assumption was incorrect. The testing that you would have expected to have been done, the monitoring that you would have expected to happen, basically didn't. And finally, after a long period of time, DEP finally realized, all that data that we're supposed to have on this project doesn't exist. And now we are essentially in catch-up mode as a town and I guess as a neighborhood. Have you been living there a while?
Yeah.
So you probably are aware of what it was like back in the old days when,
I've been there since 1983.
83? Was the operation actually still happening in those days?
Yes, it was still in operation. It closed down in 93. And they capped it in 97, I think.
Yeah, about 20 years ago. Right. Well, they kept a part of it. They kept the material that we were aware of. I'm worried about is the part that we were not aware of.
And one thing to mention on that is it's tough to rely on DEP to follow up on this testing. And I think it's important, that's what you said, that you folks who live out there, you know, hold our feet to the fire on this now going forward. It did slip through the cracks, apparently. But you're out there, you know what's going on, and boards change. People leave, people come back, things slip through the cracks. You guys are out there, you're gonna have the findings of this report, whatever it ends up with, whatever future testing has to happen. Bring it to our attention again, if you have to, you
Well,
know?
to us, it's a systems sort of issue,
Yeah.
in terms of what's the trigger that's set that has you folks going out and doing that, even if it's a calendar item and there's.
It should be, and it should be a testing that the DEP requires, but we hear all the time, DEP's understaffed, they're overworked, these things are gonna happen, and even if it's an occasional, hey, what's going on with that? Not necessarily a trigger point that you had to have a test done here, but just on occasion, hey, you following up, what's going on with this? Where are we at with this? You know, it's unfortunate, no one wants to do it, everyone's busy, but like I said, boards turn over, people at the DEP don't always follow up with these things.
There's gotta be a better way, because we're getting old, and frankly, it's gonna be a day to eat breakfast today, much less. I mean, we keep track of this, and other people move out as their kids grow
Yeah,
up.
no, granted.
And new people come in, and there won't be that sort of historical, knowledge that's still come to play. So, again, I think it's just a challenge that we gotta think about, you know, is your area, you know, the water quality, this is a big one, and you don't have any system in place that takes into account the board's changing and some sort of consistency across boards.
It's probably a good litmus test for when this does come in, that we do maybe come up with some way to ensure that, even if it's just some type of thing that's put into the computer system, which we have now, which you probably didn't have back in the 80s, that can just pop up a reminder, whoever's there, that this has to happen.
Use
you know?
abacus.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, I mean, something as simple as that, so when people do change and personnel change, it's still gonna come up, it's still gonna be in their face when these things happen. So maybe it's a point where we have to change something too when this happens.
Well, the bottom line is, we are in activation mode at this time, and we are launching an assessment of what is out there. And then that, I can't speak for the person who's been proposing this huge subdivision. My guess is, when that report came in last week, he was not a happy camper. And I don't know how that's going to impact his future plans for this site.
He's in the back row.
Yeah?
I'd be horrified if I saw that.
Well, I don't know what impact this is all going to have. But the bottom line is, we know we have a problem, and we got to get it cleaned up. Yes, ma'am.
Can I have a follow-up? Yeah. So I think it would go a long way if the neighbors could know that there would be some sort of stop work order. Mr. DePlacido is here in the room. Is it possible that there would be no more digging? These areas are outside the AUL, which is, you know, there's no digging anyways in the AUL, but outside the AUL, there's no precautions like that or regulations. Would
You're
you be?
basically proposing that the town pass some kind of stop work order? I mean, there's going to have to be some work done just to do the assessment.
Well, I mean, that would be
Nothing out there now anyway.
obviously under the direction of the LSP that you're
Right.
hiring. That would be guided. That's what I'm proposing.
Well, I guess a question for Mr. DePlacido. Is that you back there?
Yes, it is.
Do you have, given the uncertainties that you're facing, do you have any thoughts about what your plan or what you would like to do with this site in the immediate future is?
Well, first of all, for the record, my name's Thomas DePlacido. I'm actually the developer of the site. And the only work that's been out there is actually work that's been requested by the ZBA, when we've actually had to do test holes and some borings and things that have actually tried to establish what bedrock is or water tables and things. And that's what's been done most recently out there with things. You know, we are going to continue to develop the site and move forward with that. We didn't find, from the reports that we saw that were submitted to the town, there was nothing there that really wasn't, that was above and beyond what we thought was going to be there from when CDM did the development with it. And one thing that I'm curious about, and it's something maybe we've missed all along, but everybody keeps talking about there's supposed to be testing and monitoring and everything with this. I've reviewed all the orders and conditions from Conservation Commission. I've had LSPs and engineers review all the data from DEP when they actually closed out the site and things. And I'm not aware of any annual testing that was supposed to have been done by the Mann family. So if there's something out there, I would appreciate if the board could share it with us, because if there's some specific testing requirement that was supposed to be done annually, it's not something that we've had or seen that was obvious with it. So I think actually the boards in the town actually have been doing their due diligence, because I don't think there was anything required of them unless there's something out there that I haven't been able to see public, that's not in the Conservation Commission office or DEP.
Have you seen this letter from the DEP? This is dated November 17, 2017.
Yes, actually, the notice of noncompliance, and it was actually, I believe there's two concerns with that. First off, there was actually more administrative with it. They wanted to make sure that the person signing the AUL was the proper authority and had the ability to sign that and put a deed restriction on it. Also, that all the people that had any interest in the property were notified with it. And also, I think there's another condition in there that restricted specifically residential development within the AUL area. Besides that, CDM, Camp Dresser McKee, actually, they should have done some additional testing based on the ecology and what was happening out there at that time of closure. So there might have been some more testing that should have been done, but in that time frame. We're actually working to satisfy DEP's concerns with that, and we're doing that on behalf of the owners with this. And one important thing I'd like to bring up too, and Mr. Kane's a great point with that, is that ultimately I'm going to be the one who's liable for this. I don't want a problem either. So if there's something out there that really needs to be addressed and brought up and needs to be taken care of with things, I want to know about it too. You know, because I don't want to step into something that is somebody else's problem that they're actually giving to me.
So could you just clarify for me, Mr. Placido? So since 2001, are you saying that you weren't supposed to be, or not you, but there wasn't supposed to be monitoring of that AUL?
I
According to
can't
this?
find anything from DEP, Conservation Commission, that specifically says that there's supposed to be annual testing or any testing from 2001 on. If you have it, please give it to me. I'd love to see what it was. If any board can find it.
Permanent solution statement?
That's actually, has to go with the LSP when they're actually establishing what the ecology and the future outcome would be of the AUL, any impacts on plant life, species, human, and everything else.
I mean, they do close these out. They don't go on forever, so it's possible it
Correct.
was closed out. It doesn't change what's out there today, but it's possible it was closed out.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I don't think that any board or commission or DEP, from what I can see, actually missed anything and did not do their jobs. And if there is something, please, I'd love to know about it.
Well, the violation too. I mean, it's a page long, or 2 pages long. So they had a violation too listed on this report.
They didn't follow through with what they were supposed to do, Camp Dresser McKee, with that, and we're actually picking that up and actually following that through right now for DEP.
Camp Dresser McKee is just the engineer that was doing the testing. They weren't the owner. Were they responsible?
They worked with the owner. I
Yes.
don't know what happened back in 1995, All I can say is that we're working with DEP to make sure that that these concerns are addressed, and that ultimately is satisfied and the NON is taken care of.
You said that you weren't surprised by the results that you saw last week. You were anticipating that there were going to be concentrations of metals and other things that were detected.
I think if you look back at the data, that some of those tests and things were consistent with what CDM had back in that point in time.
Mhm.
And we'll continue to do testing on it.
Yeah, I mean, having walked the site recently, the one worry that I have is, you know, we kind of know what the AUL is up to, and in fact, if you just walk around that site, you don't see an awful lot of visible indications of there being a problem the way it's essentially functioning. But then you look at the old industrial site itself, and the old foundations, and if you're familiar with the area, I'm not sure you are, there's that big sort of box culvert that takes a lot of water that seems to be draining essentially through those old foundations, and it sort of dumps it out into a stream that kind of goes parallel to the Mill River, and then it turns and actually heads toward the river, and eventually goes into the river. And it's, yeah, trail race. And it's got a significant amount of material that's precipitating out. You know, it looks like iron rust.
You are correct.
And then the worry that you have is, all right, that's coming out of the ground. So somehow something underneath whatever is there is dissolving and then coming out of the ground and interacting with the air probably, and probably then precipitating as the rusty color that you see there. And then as you go down for several hundred yards, you see that color start to dissipate. And by the time you get to the confluence with the river, in fact, it's being kind of back to natural. There's duckweed growing down there, and it looks like a stream. But the question is, what else besides the iron is making its way out of that site and into the water?
And there's actually test results that are actually in that report that we put in that were done on the tail race. It's a very extensive report. I don't expect anybody to have read it thoroughly. It's over 300 pages of data back from, I want to say, as far back as '86 up until recently, in the last month or two, with that. But I mean, actually, if I've reviewed the files for conservation and things too. Mr. Mann has passed away about a year ago or so, but there actually is evidence in the minutes that actually he states that you know, that tail race was actually for a water wheel back in the 1850s, and basically had, you know, water from the ponds, and it used it for power and for fire protection and things. And actually, there's even a picture in the Conservation Commission files that actually shows that tail race or a section of it taken by the Conservation Commission agent, assuming monitoring, as they filled in sections of that too, of that box culvert. Once again, I don't know what happened back in 95, 2001 or anything, but there's evidence in the files that that box culvert was filled in, right in the Conservation Commission's files with that. And we've done dozens and dozens of test holes around the foundations and things too. Once again, I don't want to purchase anything or be involved with something that has a, you know, an issue, especially an environmental issue. So we're extremely conscientious with this and things as well.
And just to reiterate, you said there's no work going on beyond what zoning's asking you to do as far as?
The only work that we've done out there is we had to establish bedrock, which required some very deep test holes and things to go down, and just what we had to do to establish some mapping that was requested at the last ZBA meeting. And we're supposed to have a meeting this week with the ZBA, and because the town was still actually trying to find an LSP, work with it, we agreed with the town that a continuance really was the best thing, so that the next meeting could be as productive as possible, and the town had some time to do their research with an LSP to review all our information. So we're trying to be as cooperative as we possibly can with the town to find out what's there, because I want to find out what's there,
So
if there is anything.
A stop work order is counterintuitive anyway. I mean, the only work you're going to see done is going to be work done to get to the bottom of what's happening out there anyway, so.
That is correct.
Right.
We've been out there for nothing else.
With the LSP, that's what we're asking, with the town LSP.
What, with the work will be done at a certain point, whatever they require. Will, if they require testing that has to be witnessed by our LSP, then I'm sure they'd comply with what has to be done, but, someone's gonna be paying for work that has to be done by the LSP, so if they're requiring testing or drilling or excavation, then yes. But it doesn't sound like anything's happening beyond that anyway.
There's nothing happening
Right,
beyond that.
so-
And it doesn't serve any purpose for me to go out there and dig test holes without having an LSP,
Someone
an
there to do
engineer, or
it,
somebody
right.
there to monitor it.
The town is going to have their own LSP, so that person will be, sorry. Rosie McQuillan on Bush Pond Road. So my question is, and I appreciate all the testing and things you've done, but you have a very different interest in this than we as a town. I mean, we've been in this town 33 years. So we have a interest in Norfolk as our home, our town. So I just want to make sure that the testing and things that are being done are for the town
so
and the town residents.
When the town hires an LSP, they'll look at their own range of testing, they'll decide what needs to be done as far as additional testing, if they can use existing data or anything else. And that has to be, that price for that, and what they require, has to be borne by the applicant. And so whatever they need, if there's more excavation that has to be done, then, maybe they will do it for them, or someone else will come in to do it, or something like that. But, the town is going to hire someone that is working for the town, so. It's almost, it gets done twice. It gets done by the applicant, and then he's gonna pay for it to get done again. It's almost like any other engineering review that happens, a peer review, it's the same thing, so.
And just to really, I can't stress this enough, is that my environmental concerns are as much as yours, because I don't want to be involved with something that actually is significantly contaminated or has a multi-million-dollar cleanup either with that. I mean, it's not something I want to step into liability-wise, too. So, I mean, my concerns are actually with yours, too. They really are. I mean, you're concerned about possible, some type of contaminants out there or something failing. Mine is, too. And that's why I have no problem with working with the town and hiring an LSP.
So I have one more question for you. So, or to the board, did you, we have reviewed the Table 13, which is the 2018 data. And so you're saying that you knew there was arsenic, chromium, lead, mercury. You're saying you knew this, and has the town been testing the wells downstream for arsenic?
I'm not a chemist or anything with that. I will tell you that there's information in files in the town and out there that actually there was arsenic found before the developments were actually done on Cranberry Meadow upstream, and actually even further upstream. It's actually a breakdown of bedrock and granite that you have there. I mean, it's prevalent in a lot of areas wherever there's bedrock and different things. That's about all I know, but it's in some of the reports that you will see out there if you do some digging in the Board of Health and Conservation files with everything. So, I mean, there's a lot of information that's public information that you can see that go back many years, and there's some naturally occurring things out there.
Well, there are two things here. Those particular elements, you don't want to have in your drinking water. At the same time, there are very tiny concentrations of those elements, no matter where you look. And the question really for us is, what are the concentrations? Are they approaching the kinds of concentrations that basically set off alarm bells? If they're in the subpart per billion range, you can often say, as Tom just was, they're out there naturally. And I recall years and years ago when I was on the Conservation Commission and the work was being done down Park Street, on that particular side of the street, there used to be an old cranberry bog up there, that there were some concentrations of arsenic showing up in people's wells when they were actually drilling their own private wells and had to submit the analyses to the Board of Health. Yeah, there were traces of arsenic showing up. So small, tiny concentrations are not a surprise. The real question is, how big are the concentrations that you're referring to? Do you happen to have them in front of you?
I do.
So the 2018 data for the Carbonizer Lagoon, soil sample 6 is at 17.9 with the limit of 20.
17.9 parts per billion?
No, there's no units on here, but 20 is the max for soil grade 1,
Oh,
and
I love that.
and we're at
data.
17.9. And you're not even in the middle of the lagoon, you're on the edge of the lagoon. So they haven't done anything where the real contaminants are.
Well, I am a chemist, and it's a bit frustrating when I see a number without units on it to know what the heck it is. So- All right, we will look into what those numbers mean. Pardon me?
Does the town regularly test for arsenic in the town well?
Yeah, it's on the list. If you have a private well,
Well, private well, even the town water.
In our water. We
right,
might-
but I know when you build a house and you have a suite of things done for the town, do you have one of those reports handy that shows what the
The initial
data
test.
are? There are like about a dozen different priority pollutants on there that are metals. I think arsenic is on the list. Yeah.
Don't want to guess.
Okay, fine.
It's,
This is just, I don't see arsenic, but that's obviously lead, copper.
All right, well, we'll look into that one. We're not going to resolve it with,
for the 2016 water report, and I didn't see that the town had
Arsenic.
documented
Yeah.
arsenic.
I think they do additional testing besides that, and you have to, at the end
Yeah, I
there,
don't
it
know if
says
this is-
something about you
I don't know if
can
this is
ask for
comprehensive.
additional elements or concentrations of substance if you go to a certain website.
all right, well, we'll track down what those numbers mean. In the meantime, are there any other questions, concerns?
I have a concern about this
Okay.
report, relative, again, to arsenic. And it's from the 2014 surface water sampling. And it talks about concentrations of arsenic in, this is at Bush Pond. And although it says these levels aren't high enough to harm humans, that they would concentrate in organisms, fish and game, I guess there. So consumption of those organisms, fish, et cetera, could cause harm to humans. So what I'm thinking is that I know at Bush Pond, I was there last night, saw people fishing, and I did ask one of them what he was doing with the fish that he just caught. And he said, oh, it's just, catch and release. But I said, does anybody ever take the fish? He said, oh, yeah, sometimes people do take it. So I don't know if some signage should be put up, to let people know that there are potential problems in this area.
What were the concentrations?
It does not give the concentration in this report, but it's probably on the tables. It doesn't even say what table it was. Samples 1 and 2. This is from the 2014 surface water sampling. So we have to go back, I think, and look
I
at this
think
up.
we just
Well, we
wait
do
till
have
LLSP.
data.
Yeah.
If you all have private wells, because there is no town water up there yet, although if this gentleman is successful, there will be. You don't want it? Well, okay. I'm just saying that when you had your wells installed, whenever that was, or the original owner, arsenic was tested for, along with lead, copper, iron, lead, mentioned that already, manganese. So it is on the list. So we do have data from around the town, and I know that there have been a few, we'll call them hotspots, up in that part of town, where normally you don't even detect concentrations of elements like these. But occasionally, you pick up a little bit. Not enough to worry about, but it's not less than some number. It actually is detectable. So that's just a part of that part of the world where we live. Yes?
Can I ask, I think our concern is, it's Larry Wilson again. Our concern is not so much the indigenous or the naturally occurring chemicals that are in there, there's arsenic and things, unless they go above. The concern is you've got industrial chemicals that have been involved with dyeing and different, going through various sort of products being manufactured at that mill, and it changed over the years. I think there are 3 different phases in terms of each time would have brought in a load of different chemicals. And you look at this and you see cadmium, you see chromium. Now that's not anything you're going to get from breakdown in our rocks. That was something that was brought in. And our concern is that those for sure are tested, and other things in the carbonizer pit. They're things that are sort of associated with industrialization. So those are the things I think a lot of us are really worried about. And to bring up the whole idea of the wells, what's upstream and so forth, we have seen reports that we know our wells are deep, and we know they're in fractured rock, deeper than where the groundwater is flowing at this point where it's been tested. We have no idea, for example, that groundwater, how may be going into that fractured walk and actually going what appears to be upstream, but would have been downstream for the lower level aquifer. So I think to make any decision about that right now without doing the testing is irresponsible.
Well, I agree. The issue that I think we as a board have to deal with is where is the most likely impacted site? And if you have surface water that's contaminated, or if you have groundwater that's a few feet from the surface that is contaminated, the first thing I think we as a board need to look at is, all right, where's that water going? Now, if you're in a wetland area, which is essentially a groundwater discharge site, you're not too worried about that material basically backing up to a well like perhaps the one that you have. But what you are worried about is where is that water that's being basically put into the environment as surface water now because it came out of the ground. Where is that going? And certainly there is a real worry. The public wells that are downstream are going to be essentially targeted by this material as it works its way downstream. So in terms of priorities, I understand exactly what you're saying.
But my well is being charged somehow. I know when we
Sure.
have a drought,
And
my
if you're
well
in a-
doesn't work as well, even though it's something like 300 feet down.
You know, if you're in the bedrock, where are those fissures basically that are delivering the water to your wellhead? And that's
Right.
something I understand your concern.
Now, I think another thing I'd love to ask is the testing that didn't occur, that you were talking about doing in terms of the wildlife or plants and things like that. What tests were those actually that you were doing? The ones that weren't done that you said you're going to follow up and do? DEP.
We have not done, all we've done is additional borings at this point in time. And we're working with DEP. The only thing we've done right now is additional borings in multiple areas to determine the parameters of where everything is. That's all that's been done, and we're working with DEP to move forward with that.
I guess I'm confused. Is there a list of things that need to be tested or not?
Once again, I'm not an LSP, and I didn't think this was going to be a public hearing. I came here to observe, and that's basically the best answer I can give you, Larry.
We just need input from our LSP.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean,
First, we got to hire one.
I understand, they have concerns, but we can't speak on it yet until we get our data.
Yes, ma'am?
Karen McCabe, Lawrence Street. Is the plume releasing into the Mill River a reportable event to the DEP? And if yes, who does that reporting? Who will do it?
Release of what?
The plume.
The plume, Is it a reportable event? Good question. Certainly there is iron, but iron's not on our list of priority pollutants.
We need LSP to tell us that.
Well, within a few days, we're going to have a professional out there doing testing. We'll be sure to ask that person, is this a reportable event?
Again, that's why we're hiring someone. We don't have these answers. I mean, I
that's-
have no clue. I'm sure you don't, Wade, do you? I mean, I wouldn't even want to speak to it if it's...
Well, I would say take baby steps, and the LSP would be one person that would be investigating it, and if it is a contamination in the water, I'm sure he would contact the EP as a spill. But, you know, I was happy to hear that an LSP will be hired by the town. The town's putting some investing into it. I'm just wondering, talking to the Board of Health, I always like being proactive. And we have residents here who are relying on private wells for the potable water for their homes. I'm just wondering if the investment that the town's making into this AUL, which is a one-site area, which is known for many, many decades, if they could also expand their finances into testing these people's wells. So when you go home at night, you'll be able to sleep soundly, knowing that these contaminants aren't in their wells, and the wells are drinkable, and they can live in their house, and houses are habitable. And coming from the Board of Health, I think that'd be a nice angle to come from, because there's a lot of energy going to the AUL, which we already know exists. And as the decades go by, the laboratories will get more finer and finer. When you're a chemist, it used to be parts per million, now it's parts per billion. And you can go back to any kind of field work years ago and come up again and find new things in there because you have better technology to find things. But my concern as a sanitarian, and thank you very much for recognizing that license, would be their health, their well-beings in their homes. I think there's a lot of fear going in that community. I've read some of the reports. A lot of the water is going towards Franklin. It's going that way, away from you. That last report, the 301-page report, it's digital, so it's hard to go through it back and forth. I was reading parts of it, and I haven't made a conclusion on it, but the writer was also talking about the water going away from the wells. And he was a little, being very cautious in the writing, because of course he's putting in writing, doesn't want to have liability landed on him, saying there may have, because of the cracks in the rocks that could affect these wells. But as a Board of Health, and your charge is for individual homes' habitability, and you do have the Mass General laws dealing with portable water and the quality of it for homes, and the town is going to invest money into this AUL, which is really nice to hear. Could they also invest into the community that lives across the street, that are here in front of you in fear of their house being contaminated?
I don't think there's any way you could make a report without testing wells, because there are literally test spots around that area. And I don't think they could even possibly go forward with the finding without testing those wells somehow anyway, to make sure that nothing's migrated there.
Well, so far, none of the wells have been tested. The people who live in homes aren't testing their own wells, and I haven't seen any reports of any.
Has anybody around the room in recent times?
One guy who's testing today, and I asked him to add ours.
Okay. Because one thing as a Board of Health agent or the Board of Health itself, because you're saying, why aren't you acting? You know, we got this thing, what's going on? And first thing, you have to have a problem. You know, you have to have a problem presented to an office so they can react to it. If you have dogs in the neighborhoods and they're not barking, no one's going to go and do anything. So if the dogs are barking, you can say, these dogs are barking, so can you please, help us with the noise control? So if you have wells, well, you have to have a problem, man. I've seen you raising your eyes up. You have to show a problem from your wells that your drinking water are in jeopardy. Other than that, we're just sitting here with fear. We're spinning around, saying, oh, no, there's an AUL across the street. What's going on? Let's hire more people to study this little piece right here. And they will. They'll study it well, and they'll have more reports coming out. But it's your well water that you're really concerned about. I'm assuming it's your well water that this is really concerned about, because the AUL is a separate entity from a lot of things that's going on around here. Yeah,
It goes downhill, just like he says, it goes into.
Part of this order that was brought up, the AUL, is brought up because of the ecology around it. It's not dealing with the underground water, it's the ecology. And I did contact Mr. Joe Laughlin. I did ask him personally, he's the one that initiated this order, is this order related to the wells across the street? Because I'm concerned about your wells. And he answered no. Okay, that's, you can contact him yourself. And I said, is this order part of the DePlacido's project? Are they separate? And he said, yes. So that's the stuff that's coming into the office. I only received this in March. I know it was a November order. I received it in March, so I started looking at it. Came on the board meeting last week. Well, last time it was a non-gender event, and I'm a consultant to the board, so I was caught off guard. So I did look into it. So this is an order, but again, this is a fear, for you guys living across the street, this is fear. So I think, personally, as an agent of the board, I think your well should be looked at and maybe tested. I'm not sure who's gonna pay for it, but I'm hearing the town wants to invest money into this. It's your home, private wells, you own that well. You can test your own well. And that's usually it's, put your money where your mouth is type of deal. If you could present a problem to this board, then you have something to work on. But just spinning around saying the sky is falling, it's very difficult for someone to help you.
Let's move on. Yes. A new voice
I have an additional question for
A
what
new
you
voice is moving on. Do you have something else you wanted to say?
For what he said about Franklin. Has Franklin been notified about this? Because Franklin has town wells right on the edge of this, so have they been notified about this? And should they? I assume they should.
They certainly should.
So who notifies Franklin?
We can all say they certainly should. I don't know whether, in fact, they already have or not. I don't know.
Who notifies them? Like, I don't know that. Like, whose responsibility?
That's a good Jack Hathaway question, because I don't know myself. The town administrator?
Okay.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, just one small thing. Our concern is not just our wells. Our concern is for the fact that the Mill River, Bush Pond, the Mill River, the wetlands around the Mill River is all part of our neighborhood. People do walk down there. We walk our dogs down there. People fish off. I wouldn't eat the fish off out of Bush Pond, but people do. People let their dogs swim in it. We used to, actually. But and the Mill River flows down eventually into the Charles River watershed, and I know that there are issues with what goes from various places into the Charles. And I don't know if the Board of Health is concerned with that or if that's somebody else's concern. But we live here and we live in this, it's not just our backyard or our well that we're concerned about. It's the whole ecosystem, sort of. It's the neighborhood. And like I said, I've been here 35 years, so in the same house, in the same area. And a lot has changed, but we need to be concerned about the whole thing. Plus, there's the bridge repairs and the causeway project and what's going on with Bush Pond because of that. And there's a little bit more to it than just our wells.
Well, I appreciate your community-wide concern, because that's really where the board is coming from, too. We have to basically look out for the public health of the folks who live in this town. And if it impacts folks from Franklin, yes, that's a concern as well. But we are concerned about, mostly right now anyway, the impact of all of this activity on what is essentially the only place where we get our drinking water in this town. If you don't have a private well, it's all based on a public well. Either way, it's a well. And out of that ground where the water is coming, a lot of stuff is going in, besides our septic waste. All that goes in there too, as you're probably aware. And we want to make sure there's not a very close loop on that particular cycle. So, yeah, the board is very concerned. And I think the other town boards are looking to us for some guidance in terms of what they need to do to protect the quality of the groundwater. So, we are working together with the selection of an LSP and with moving forward on the assessment process for the site. So we are just starting, but there's lots to be done.
So this is a Zone 2 for the Franklin well. It is the Zone 2 for the Franklin well. So can you, as a board chairman, speak with Jack Hathaway about whether or not we should be informing Franklin of the report that Maybet just handed in?
Yeah, we'll find
That
out.
will happen.
It hasn't happened yet already, someone should, obviously.
Anything else, folks? If not, do appreciate your energy and concern. We are listening.
We're not going.
We appreciate your listening. And working together with the other boards, that's really important.
That's the only way a town this size can be effective, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Take
Can
care.
we ask Mr. Placido to respond to this other thing?
I got a question.
Before he leaves?
Tom?
Just thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, thank you for
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
I watch all the agendas and everything else, because I know there's a lot of activity going on with this project, and I wasn't expecting to answer questions or anything else, but thank you for the time.
We've got the most popular subdivision in town right now, it sounds like. Fran, could you have one more?
We had something in our correspondence that maybe you could bring some light to. It has to do with River's Edge and wastewater treatment plant there, and DEP violations since 2013.
Actually, there was a plant operator there, there was a plant operator that was there.
Oh,
Tom, can you talk in the microphone?
The
Right behind you.
microphone is right there.
Just try it, see if it works. Should just work, Tom.
Actually, back in 2013 or 2014, there were a couple of months, probably 3 or 4 months there, that that the operator at the time was actually trying to resolve some issues with the pump that was going, with the pump and some other things that were happening with that. Worked on it. Actually, we lost confidence in that wastewater treatment plant operator, and actually relieved him and replaced him with somebody else. And since that time, it's been functioning in compliance, as far as I know, up into 2017-18 on that. But I think you'll see that some of it even might have been, I think we replaced them in beginning of 2017, and most of those NONs were maybe just after that or just before that with things. But we were on top of it. We were notified, and DEP was notified, and we made the proper adjustments. And I'm unaware of anything that's come out most recently with stuff.
Most recently was November of 2017, fecal coliform levels were high. So that, but you're saying that you folks have
Yeah, we've
addressed it?
we've been on top of it with everything, and the wastewater treatment plant operator. Some of that, I think, like that November letter, it might refer back to some data that's maybe like 6 months before. If you look into it, the letter might be dated
Okay.
November, but the data is quite a few months back with stuff. And I want to say we brought on a new operator right around in April of 2017.
How often does it get tested, Tom?
I'm sorry?
How often is it tested?
There's a lot of different tests. I mean, some are monthly, some are weekly. I think there might even be some daily tests.
The ones that failed, what was the total coliform?
Total coliform,
Yeah, do you have any idea how often that's tested?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Could you just forward us the next one that's tested, the results, just so we see
I
it's
think
in
you guys
compliance?
get it anyways.
Should we get them anyway?
Yeah.
All right. So we should be able to see it's in compliance. then.
Yep, and it's all online and things also with the DEP website. They actually just updated all that and put everything electronically.
Thank you. Sorry to grab you on the way out, but it's helpful,
Yeah.
because
No-
now the answers,
Yeah,
we
no-
have the answer.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Sometimes I can answer questions, sometimes I can't. I try my best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You too.
So when it comes to the LSP for this site, it says we're controlling the groundwater. How come we weren't asked to put our input in the RFP?
Good question for the selectman or for Jack. I didn't even know there was an RFP out.
No.
All I saw was a bunch of responses came back.
So we're supposed to be kind of taking the lead on this, and then we give our comments to the zoning board.
The ZBA actually has direct
But they get the.
supervision
They
of
do,
the
but they
project.
take input from the boards, and then they do all the permitting and decision-making. We don't have the project presented in front of us, so, I mean, this is kind
Well-
of strange that we haven't had this.
Well, we had this conversation the last
Right,
time.
exactly.
There is a new belief in the need to work collectively.
So we really haven't commented on this project.
Well,
So
no.
I actually drafted a letter. I sent it to Betsy, but I don't know where it ended up, saying, please send this to the other boards, saying if they have,
I was told to hold off.
okay.
Well, in fact, it happened. I mean, in terms of the reaching out, it is already happening. I mean, I got this call from John Weddleton to go out and, actually, after the result of the conversation, I said, wait a minute, let's go out and take a look. He said, okay, how about tomorrow? So off we went.
I'd
So
also
there is a
like to look.
belief, well, there's a lot to see out there. It's a big space.
I'd love to walk.
You know where it is, right?
Well, I thought, at the last meeting, I mentioned this, and folks said, no, don't go out there. You know, it's not,
Oh.
is it private property? I don't
It
know.
is. Yeah.
It's
You
free
should ask
country.
Mr. DePlacido.
Or do we have rights for the zoning to enter the property to review it, and we can ask the zoning board if it's under their purview that we're allowed to go out there right now?
I'd love to go out with Wade.
I just-
You've been there before?
I'm getting a hard time, this AUL is now becoming part of the DePlacido project. I'm seeing it's separate entities. I really am. It's also
We
being
have to-
viewed as separate
When he
entities.
buys the property, he buys the AUL.
Right.
But he hasn't bought anything yet. But right now, we're looking at the AUL and licensed site professionals can be hired, which I'm very happy to hear. The town's investing into it. But, I don't know, there's just, like right now, for instance, there's the hydrogeologic report for the wastewater treatment plant for the 40B there has been approved. The applicant has been allowed to go with his wastewater treatment plant plans. This is a separate entity from AUL. People are just like looking at the AUL saying, the AUL is the project, but the AUL is a separate entity from the zone, from this 40, the two 40Bs are there, even though it's on the same piece of property. There are many areas where there could be super funds or even some kind of contamination going on, and people are living very close by it, living their normal lives, and the contamination is being cleaned up. You know, I'll give you one perfect example, would be the joint base down on Cape Cod. They have the Air Force, the Army, and the Coast Guard all working there, living there, and they got super funds all over the place being cleaned up and stuff properly, but people living by, driving right by it. So because you have an AUL here which needs work or needs to be restudied, doesn't mean people can't live next to it. And that's why one of the concerns I had with the private wells across the street. I know the lady's saying, oh, well, it's not just the wells, but talking to the Board of Health, it's the wells. I mean, in my heart, it's the wells. If anything, it's the wells again, and it's been there for decades. And all of a sudden now it's coming up because of the project. So now they're blending both of them together, and I'm just having a hard time seeing
Well,
that.
I think we have to have those tested, and that's kind of goes back to the whole thing that we haven't had input on the RFP. I mean, that should be in there, that we want this done. Now we've got to kind of remember this going forward, so when it does come back with the LSP or something, we say, well, we kind of want this too. And as you're saying, if it's the, if there's an issue with the wastewater treatment plant, and that's an infiltration system on site, right? Was that ever blended in with what's coming out of the AUL?
The 301-page report, which I briefly looked through, and I like to get a hard copy because it's easy to read, did mention the treatment plant. And again, he's also talking about the water flow going away from the Lawrence Street area. So,
Well, yeah, the worry that frankly I have has got nothing to do with the development. It's got everything to do with it's already in the ground. There is an industrial site there that was abandoned. Part of it was remediated. I think, and I've got some visual data to support this, that a part of it was never really cleaned up.
Well, it sounds like they buried a lot on site. It was not a lined landfill, it was a capped landfill. So this really isn't surprising that you now have leachate coming out of there.
Well, this isn't even where the landfill is. I'm talking about the old industrial site. I'm talking about those concrete slabs.
area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The AUL is downstream of all this. There's an old race that comes off They used to use as a water supply. I guess they used to actually drive a water wheel.
When,
And that water, and other water coming down the hill perhaps, is essentially leaching through something, and what comes out and gets into that box culvert has got an awful lot of stuff in it.
in the early 2000s, they presented a subdivision up there, and I was on the Concom. And one of the things we asked them about this, because they had mentioned there's old tunnels to these old buildings with the water coming through. And we said, where are they? Where do they go? Where do they come from? Let's have someone do a camera survey of this, or at least a dye test. Tell us where these things are under the site, and they didn't want to do it. And that project was
Who is they?
tabled. The owner at the time, Mr. Mann, came in, he was looking to put a subdivision up there, conventional subdivision, not a 40B. And that's what we started talking about. Well, we don't know where these tunnels are, where they come from, what could be leaching out through them if you've got these, we don't know what they're, a basement they're from or whatever. Do a dye test, do a camera survey, do something to tell us where they are, because you've got tunnels under the site. And you can't build houses on them, you don't know what's under there.
Well, I'm not sure if anybody was looking at actually taking those old concrete foundations and pulling them out of the
Right.
ground, because this is way, way far away from any of that. But anyway, bottom line is we have some issues. They are linked to our public domain, which is groundwater quality.
We have to know, what's like you said, what's there now, what's happening now, but also what would happen if it was developed on top of it or next to it? What would that impact be?
But again, a problem has to be presented to the Board of Health so you can act.
Well, I think it has been presented now.
Well, we are in the loop now, for
No,
sure.
No,
we
it's
don't know.
discussion, and I'm just concerned about fear. It's an emotion. And
Right,
it's
but
not
I don't
logical.
expect the residents to come in and pinpoint exactly what they're worried about and start talking about reportable concentrations and stuff. They can say, we have a concern about this, environment and water. It's been presented to us,
And the town's hiring a licensed site professional.
Absolutely.
But if I had a well and I had something going down the street and I'm watching my family drinking it and brushing their teeth in, I'd be testing it.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I
Identifying
think
some
we
problem.
have to have
And then
that
I go-
done as part of this report. It makes no sense that you have wells across the street from an area that we're talking about potential groundwater contamination. These are, in essence, test points that are already in place for us to look at. I don't know how you could actually do a comprehensive report without looking at those water results.
And I haven't heard any kind of information from those wells, from the private or from any reports of, no one's going
Yeah,
across.
well, that's what I'm
that
saying,
system.
going forward, we have to, that should be our concern. That's why I'm a little concerned that we didn't have any input on this, is that should be
Have you
part of it.
seen the data that was presented to us last Friday from
I-
Dr. Placido's consultant?
It was emailed to me, it's a digital form, it's
Yeah.
intense. And I was looking,
This is a 15-pager. This isn't a long
Yeah, but
report.
the whole thing is actually,
the whole thing's 301
it's
pages.
302
let's do it.
pages,
Goes
because it
with-
has the hydro.
Yeah, it does have the 16
wastewater
pages and
treatment
stuff. I
plant.
briefly went through it, then I started going farther down into it, and they had diagrams and more information, and it's just something that needs to be
Results and
looked
all
at.
that, yeah.
But also, I did pull out parts of it where they talked about the private wells and the residential wells too, and the impacts on it. And they talked about the cracks in the rocks and how the sources of it could be at different areas and stuff and impacts. It was written well. Also, there's another part too. He mentioned that the treatment plant should be designed to receive more homes and more wastewater. And I wasn't sure where he was coming from. Was that from the Lawrence Street people? And if that's the case, this hydrogeologic person, I mean, the Board of Health would be involved with individual septic systems being brought into a treatment plant. I mean, you're missing, you're not involved in it. I just saw.
Well, yeah, the issue is this whole 40B nature to the oversight process, which keeps us at arm's length.
Well, by definition, though, all the boards are supposed to put their comments into zoning,
Right.
and we never did that.
And I did write a letter last June regarding the very
Okay.
beginning part of it. I talked about the AUL, I talked about the possibility of where's the water source coming from. There's like a page and a half memorandum to the zoning board of appeals, and then the project turned into a treatment plant, a 40B treatment plant, so that's a state permit, so I got out of it. Well, I wasn't asked to comment anymore. I have to, you have to understand, I have to be asked to do stuff. I don't go around to people's desks and pull stuff out and run down the street and start reviewing it. No one's asked me to review it since they went into the treatment plant.
Well, I tell you what, wait, in the future, it is important that when something this size comes along, that you bring it to the board. because we just need to know that we're being asked to comment on something which has got a huge footprint and is having as we now know, an enormous, neighborhood response. And without knowing something about what's going on, it's hard for anybody here.
It was the very beginning, and then all the ones came in, and the request never came back to the Board of Health. I don't know why. The office was being ignored. But just like this order here wasn't brought, a November order regarding this project wasn't brought into the Board of Health office until March.
Could you just clarify for me, this LSP that the town is hiring, they're going to look at, this person is going to look at 140 acres. Is that correct?
Well, it might not be one person, it might be a firm.
Well, I don't know, whatever.
But whatever, yeah.
But I mean, it's...
I've never read the RFP.
Because you mentioned
No,
something
right,
about
right.
just the AUL.
That's what the concern is, the AUL, and if it needs to be.
Well, it's the site. It is a whole industrial site. The AUL is the part that we actually have some control over. The real worry is the part that we have no control over. Like you were talking about, where do those pipes come from? Where do they go? There are concrete foundations there which you just got to assume. They must have a floor drain in there somewhere, but you can't even see it now. So,
Well, that's part of the investigation. I think also the report mentioned maybe the AUL should be discontinued as it is now and then redeveloped to a new AUL with this new study. I think there's
well, if the data supports that, then sure.
It needs to be expanded, and I think that's good, and they could probably include the foundations.
And that's the applicant's LSP's recommendation, correct?
I'm sorry?
That's the applicant's LSP's recommendation?
Yeah, the 301-page
Right,
report,
right,
yeah.
so-
It's mentioned it. But again, I was briefly looking through it, trying to see
Right.
what angle they were coming at, if everything was okay or was bad. And
I'm just saying, from the applicant's LSP doing it, it was troubling what there was in there, just from his point of view, and this is someone working for the applicant. Not that he's not gonna tell the truth, but even if he
Well,
tried to spin it a little
Right now,
bit.
Tom doesn't own it.
No, I know, but I'm saying he's
So
the
he
applicant.
needs to
for it.
know.
No, but
Yeah.
right, but he's paying for that one
Now.
under his development, and he's correct, completely correct that he wants to know too, because 5
Yeah.
years down the line, someone comes in with contaminated wells, and it's because of a plume or something that hit there, and he hasn't sold off the property, he's still owning it. He doesn't want to deal with that. That's just an open-ended, that's just a money pit.
But he's gone to the banks to get money to, hopefully to develop this.
Oh, he's still
I think
trying
it-
to, right?
Yeah,
he's going for permitting, at least
Yeah.
wastewater treatment plant permitting. He's going through the zoning board
Yeah.
of appeals to get permits.
so he has money and stake here, right?
Well, yeah, he's
Must
trying to
be
get it. He's
paying.
already got money involved in doing it,
Right.
Plant alone is an investment.
but it's
So we're
short
saying he
change compared
doesn't
to what
own
it could be.
it, but he's got a lot of
Well,
money.
he has a contingency, I'm sure, that as long as he can permit the property, he'll buy it. But I'm sure he has outs too, and part of that is environmental issues, which it typically is on any type of development.
This is a large scale, but sometimes there's small little mini pollution sites in communities, like someone's underground storage tank could leak, and then it'd be contaminated, and so that area is cleaned up, but the people around the neighborhood aren't told to leave. It's still, I mean, it's more of a, it's a controlled area, it's a small area.
Well, I just think when these reports come in, whoever they hire, whatever happens, it'd be nice to read through the RFP anyway, but we just gotta keep an idea that we're looking at groundwater, and every time we look at these reports, we gotta kinda keep that in mind, that we look through and it hasn't been addressed.
Also, the surface ecology too, maybe no one should be fenced,
The same-
Well, in the meantime, Betsy,
Maybe
can we
it should
get a
be fenced
copy of the
off.
RFP?
because right now,
Okay.
it sounds like Tom
Would
could have
you,
worked on
if
it.
it's electronic, just send it to everybody. All right, so because it is interesting, we need to know actually, what is the sphere of interest? Is it mostly just the AUL, or are they taking a look at the whole site, including the upland part? Or is it just the Buckley and Mann piece? We need to get a handle on what exactly it is that the LSP is actually going to be responsible for.
And one of the residents regarding the benthic aquatic life in that pond was very
Yeah,
nice to hear
and
too.
that should be conservation.
Yeah, maybe restricted fishing should be there, or a warning should be there. That's of interest also.
Yeah, and again,
Oh,
that's got to be addressed.
Then we got to find out, why,
Right,
or
right.
what data tells
If
us.
it's going in, if it's going into that area, I mean, because
I mean, honestly, you could go to any pond around here and check and find fish that could have a contamination level. We don't know where it's coming from. Let's find out what's going on before we
it
start
could be
throwing
from
signs
it
up.
could be from acid rain also. It could be from different
Arsenic?
pollution particles come from clouds going into the ponds. The state does, on the Great Lakes, the state does have notifications of lead because of pollution falling in through rainfalls, and there's some areas where you can't eat the fish, or they have warnings that pregnant women should not eat so many fish per week. So it's out there. I mean, it's not just coming from AUR, it could come from other environmental
Yes,
situations.
mention that in this report.
All right, we have an agenda here,
Okay.
folks. We're probably spent enough time on this project. Next on our list, a vote on the proposed amendment to the existing regulations for the Board of Health's restrictions on the sale of tobacco products. Postpone this for a month.
And I can tell you that the legislature has not acted on the bill yet. So it is, it's Bill 4109, so it's still within the House and Ways Committee. And once again, I just want to go on record as saying that I'm for this, not because I'm trying to single out one retail store, but because we do have a pharmacy in town, and the responsibility of pharmacies are to protect and maintain as much as possible the health of the citizens that they serve. And for that reason, the sale of tobacco products and electronic cigarettes in a pharmacy is counterintuitive. It makes no sense. And there's enough data out there to show us that tobacco is just, killing more people than, and if we could do something about that, we should do something about it. So, and just as a final note, there have been, we talked about the 160 communities who have already adopted these regulations out of the 351. There may be a few more even as we speak. But of those 160, 22 of them had one single pharmacy in their town, even though they had many other retail stores that sold tobacco. So we're not setting precedent here.
And my
Counterpoint, sir?
belief was that no business, is what this pharmacy is, has no requirement under the law to make sure they have they're keeping people safe. I mean, it's a business, you're allowed to buy what's in there that's legally being sold, and I think we're over-regulating by doing that when we already have regulations in place that put us close to the state's, well, actually at the state standard, and if there's changes at the state level, then we will have to comply with those. But I think we have enough in place to be safe, and people should be able to make a decision as far as what they want to buy in a retail establishment.
Even though a pharmacy is considered a healthcare institution under
Even
the
though
law
pharmacies
in
sell
Massachusetts.
many other things that are harmful to the health of the public and still operate as a business, so yes.
Okay.
And geographically and in every other way, I'm writing it down here, because
Swing vote,
I
John.
understand exactly the principle that is driving, the argument, Fran, and that is, if it's based on principle, the incongruity of having a establishment which is nominally there to help people stay healthy or to improve their health. That's what pharmacies are for. To have them also selling something that we know is going to detract from that is going to, in fact, result in serious illness and, for 400,000 Americans every year, death. That is a major incongruity. At exactly the same time, the issue of Board of Health passing a regulation which impacts exactly one retail establishment in the town, and not the half a dozen others that are almost within walking distance in several cases. I get that argument too. I really do. And so now the question is which way to go on this.
I can tell you a story of how I was in
Story.
a story. I was in Walgreens the other day because I'm really concerned about electronic cigarettes, and that since in the last 4 years, the incidence among teens, middle school and teens, has increased 25% in the last 4 years of electronic cigarettes, and we're talking about nicotine again, which is an addictive agent. So I wanted to know what electronic cigarettes are all about, because I don't know. And there was a young woman behind the counter, and she was not much older than 17 or so. And she was very helpful. And I asked her, well, show me these electronic cigarettes and tell me about them. And she said, well, you know, they're not as bad as smoking. And is that the message that the pharmacy wants to be giving out to people, you know, that go in there?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's just one experience.
And there's one thing I'll say, just as a counterpoint, but as a parent of someone who is in the middle school and has heard about there is a vaping epidemic, they call it, and things like that. I'm not
Yes.
saying there's not, but
Yeah.
as in most things that are gotten today, it's done online. It's not done with kids walking into a store and pretending to have fake IDs or snickering and trying to pretend that they're 18. Everything's online.
No, they can see it. I mean, what they're doing is seeing it in a pharmacy where they're supposed to be going to
Again,
get
that's
healthy
they can
products.
see it
So,
online.
doesn't-
That's what the advertising is.
Well,
Well,
I'm telling you what
Fran's
this young
argument
person
is the
told me.
context.
okay.
You know, you're seeing it in a place that normally you associate with where you go to buy things to keep you healthy, and here's something that'll kill you. So, well, I tell you what, we got to make a decision here. I do, and
Someone make a motion?
somebody make a motion. That's a good idea. Fran, you want to make a motion?
I motion that we accept the regulation as we, I don't
As
even have-
proposed,
as
shall we
proposed.
say?
Yeah, to include healthcare pharmacies, to include pharmacies as healthcare institutions in our regulations for sale of tobacco products.
All right. I think we know what that motion is all about. Is there a second?
Yeah, do we want to mention anything about prohibiting sales in that?
Prohibiting the sale of tobacco products in pharmacies.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, Fran.
Well, it's not me, I don't smoke,
Well,
so.
no. The pragmatic one over the principled on this one for me. So,
I don't think you got too much feedback either way.
Okay, let's move on.
yep, let's move on. MRC updates? Fran?
So, we're, emergency dispensing site plan, I went to a meeting in Walpole, Region 4A meeting. We now have a boilerplate plan that we can just plug in information. And so we had gotten the plan, but I didn't know how to use it. So I went to a workshop and met with, this was in Walpole 2 weeks ago, and met with a few folks that explained, you know, this is how you walk through the plan, and gave a succinct 8-document group of papers so that we can start working on right away, which is really about contact information. And so I'm hoping again to work with Betsy once town meeting's over and things quiet down again, and see if we can finally get a dispensing plan together. And also, I went to Rentham, so because I was told by this individual, Tyler Bonacosi, that he's the Region 4A Public Health Preparedness Coordinator. He ran the workshop that Rentham had their plan almost done. So I went to Rentham and I met with one of their nurses, public health nurses, and she explained to me that it's a work in progress, and it's always, people change, she's always changing it, and the state's coming out with new mandates. So we'll just keep working on it. And the MRC is supposed to meet on Monday, and we also are planning on going to the senior center and helping folks sign up with Blackboard Connect. All of our landline phones are on that, but our cell phones and emails are not on it unless you physically go onto the website and put that information in. So, for example, the town meeting, the town elections, I received a call on my cell phone as well as the home phone because I've signed up for it. So a lot of people don't have landline phones anymore. So I think it's a good thing. So we're going to do that at the senior center. When they have, I think it's May 17th, I'm not sure about the date, I'd have to look it up, to help them if there are folks that need help doing the online sign-up.
Yeah, that's great.
So, I don't know, we're moving along, bits and pieces. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
Okay. I did reference the work of the MRC when I had my little spiel in front of the candidates' night crowd of not very many people.
They were watching you on television. Yes.
Anyway, emergency dispensing site,
So that was what I
Same
just
thing.
talked about, yeah.
and anticipated new business. Anybody got any unanticipated new
We
business?
already discussed it, the RFP and things like that, so.
All right. So in terms of next steps, getting the RFP is going to be a really good thing to do. Betsy, is there an official kind of, I don't know, information dissemination process going on in town about Ugly Man and Abbeville? Because I know people are always talking. And I'm usually getting this stuff
Reach out to maybe
secondhand.
Rich McCarthy on that?
Is he taking the lead? Yeah, I guess he is.
Be the sort of the liaison, I think.
Yeah. All right. It'd be useful if there was some kind of standard listserv that everybody that needs to know. I mean, basically, like you, as the collecting spot for everything for the Board of Health, certainly needs to be in the loop on whatever's happening. And you can just send an email out to all of us. So the things like RFPs that come along, we don't see the after effect. Yeah, that'd be good. All right. If there's no other business.
Well, we do
Motion
have-
to accept the minutes.
We have minutes.
Oh, minutes, right,
Actually,
yeah.
we rolled over a couple of things. Well, actually, do we organize tonight or not?
Oh, yeah. That's right, I forgot to put that on. Do you want to do it next meeting?
Yeah,
We can do it next meeting. That's fine.
I got a question actually on the RFP. Do you want the actual proposals that they've received? Do you just want the request for proposals?
Well, we'd like to know what the scope of what the
Right.
work was that they were responding to, so I think we like the RFP.
I'd give both. I mean, how many responses did they get? Do you know?
I would say 5 or 6.
I mean, I wouldn't mind reading over a couple of those just to see exactly what they cover. Sometimes they're worded different in the RFP, and then you read through what they're actually covering, and it might be different, so. And how big are the responses?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them.
Are they gonna narrow down to a short list first, do you know?
I don't know.
No, maybe just the RFP for now.
The big problem is, I mean, unless you're in the business, how do you even evaluate an LSP proposal?
Read it. And
No, in terms of the qualifications.
Qualifications, as long as as long as you have a licensed site professional, I mean, then he's licensed to do it. I mean, but
Yeah, but these guys,
you go with the firm, right? Again, you don't know. I mean, I know some of the firms that are decent-sized firms and everything, not to say that I know
Oh.
who responded to it. I don't know that.
Okay.
But it's a real specialty.
Their history would be one good resource.
yeah.
Right, they have projects they've worked on, and that's usually part of their proposals as well, that they put that in, that they've worked on these before. So,
So it sounds like the RFPs are already went out.
yeah, oh yeah, really
Oh, no,
good,
they've
yeah.
got responses
They've already
back.
gotten responses.
Okay.
Yeah, we're,
Actually, they're due back tomorrow. The responses are due in tomorrow.
Oh.
Okay.
No, I heard there were, in fact, saw there were like 5.
I think so.
So that means they're working underneath the scope of a budget. So they're not thinking about testing the wells across the street. I don't.
there's
think
always after charges if you want, they'll give you a price per whatever, or they could always add something onto it if need be.
I did extensive testing once for a community I worked for. It was dealing with a landfill that was capped 20 years. It wasn't capped. There was a landfill that a chemical company owned and gave it to a town. Given the town. At the time, it was going through a cap back in the, I think maybe the 90s or the 80s. It was going through a capping procedures through the state. And it came to my attention because people who was living around that landfill were having problems with their children. They had neurological problems, and they were wondering if that landfill had a part of it. So the CDC was there, the DEP. I was asked to go there because I was working in a neighboring town, and the town itself was there. And the chemical that was leaching was a chemical that wasn't even on the list. So they went through Rhode Island and had a lab, set up some certain procedure so the state would recognize it and accept that procedure. So with that going, I opened up, and it was all private wells in the area. I tested half a mile of wells in that area for the town residents, just first to see if they had it, second just for their own peace of mind. So we did the testing, and that came up to almost a little under 20,000. It was a pretty extensive test.
Mhm.
We did one of those EPA 602 reports, pretty much what you have here for
Yeah.
transfer properties included with that. So we did put the money out there, we sampled it, and it was good. It was good.
I mean, the other thing, if we have a list of what they have for contaminants out there, that could help narrow down this list of testing.
Narrow it right
Exactly.
down.
Right.
And you can ask your certified lab which one would travel.
Yeah. And I'd be honest with you,
Some
I
of those
mean,
won't travel. They're very heavy metals. They'll stay in the soil.
even before waiting for an LSP, I want to know what was in my well, you know? I mean, at least get a price for doing it myself. I mean, I'd love to have the town do it, but first I'd want to know too, you know? I wouldn't want to wait.
Do you know what the cost is for the standard suite of things that we have new wells tested for? Is it like a couple $100 or $300?
See up to 500.
Is it 500 now?
Well, again, with that report, you have an idea of some of the things you can narrow it down to.
This is difficult because there's no control. There's no recent testing.
Right.
'Cause I haven't heard anybody come forward for the well water.
But at least someone said it was getting tested today. I'm sure if something comes back, we're going to hear about it.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
I hope both
One way or
ways,
the other.
if it's clean or
Right.
it's dirty.
Right.
But how do you know what to test for?
I guess-
You know, I mean, I saw hydrogenated petroleum products, I saw VOCs, I don't know, is that all on a standard test? How
Yeah, it
does
is
one-
actually. When these testing companies get a sample for drinking water, let's say, they know that this is the set of pollutants that people are most interested in, like all these things that you see on this list here.
But you
There's
can
one
also,
test that does every single one of these.
But
and you
if
can test for the
you're
things
talking
that
about-
showed up in that report as well, the heavy metals that they talked about and things like
Yeah,
that.
but
Correct.
do you know, how are they going to know what to ask for if it hasn't already been detected, like from
Well,
a
that's a
very
tough one. I
high?
mean, that could be in any well.
Well, it would have to be related to the
But
AU.
related to the property, though,
Yeah.
what was done on that,
Oh.
the dye, whatever they used to dye materials
Right.
there. I'm talking about,
Yeah, I mean, that is the issue. I mean, there's the solvents and there's also the dyes themselves. What do they use? Were they, organic dyes or were they things based on metals? I mean, those are the kinds of questions that we need to have answered to give some idea as to what to look for.
And
Well
they-
tested.
And to save money, they could have multiple wells along the property, of different levels, grabbing water, samples of water, different levels, because contaminants do float differently, and it doesn't act as a cloud, acts as a ribbon, and it mixes together and changes the different chemicals. I mean, it's difficult to analyze,
Yeah.
but you have to have a lot of wells in the ground to get some kind of feedback.
Well, if you walk around the AUL, there are a whole bunch of stakes that say AUL on the side, but they're just stakes. I mean, they're just reference points. Maybe someday they're going to be test holes, I don't know. But there are a few actual, there's at least a couple we saw, test holes around the AUL
I
that
was gonna say, I
somebody's
couldn't
looking at.
imagine they're gonna test in the AUL, they already know it's contaminated.
No, you can't break the cup
Right.
cap, that's like a no.
The perimeter, you could.
Yeah,
Perimeter
that's
outside
what these
of it.
are.
Yeah. Maybe look at the groundwater.
All right, so let's read through the RFP, I mean.
Yep. All right. Give you this back. Anything else, Fran?
Minutes.
Did you send us the minutes? Because I don't remember getting minutes.
Yeah, it was just this afternoon though, so it was late.
I mean, we don't-
6:45.
No, it wasn't 6:45.
Wicked late in the
4:30.
afternoon. I haven't read them, so
Put them off to the next one.
when are we going to meet again? What's coming up?
When are they, I hate to go back to this thing, but when are they supposed to approve or choose a LSP? When is that date?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the
I
next,
wasn't
They're
involved.
due tomorrow, so presumably in the next week or so.
isn't the next zoning board meeting June 2nd? So were they gonna be able to turn that around before, hire someone and then have the hearing? Or will they can just continue it again?
I don't know.
Hey, do you know why it was continued this time?
Because they need
Yeah.
to hire the,
They needed, I think they needed
RSP.
some more, they granted the board an extension to do more investigation? I don't know.
Well, they're not going to get a study done in a month. I'm not quite
No,
sure.
we just gotta make sure we get our concerns being handled. Have you had a chance, did you read the RFP?
Did you see it, Wayne?
No, it's the first time I heard about it. I'm actually really happy to hear that there was investment going into the AUL, because there's been so much talk about it, and so much fear coming from it, that it's, I think it's very unhealthy.
Well, Fran, when you have your walk around, you're going to be unimpressed with the AUL. It looks like a big pasture
yeah.
It should look
with
like
a with
It's a
a
nice
with a dirt
looking-
track around the outside.
And that's a good thing. If you had a bunch of dead trees and stuff in the
Well, if
animals,
anybody's going out there,
skeletons.
let me know through Betsy or something. Or just email me.
I only go on private property when I'm asked to go.
Okay. So,
I'm just
I'm
afraid
sure
it's
I'll
gonna
get there one of
chosen.
these days. So we're not gonna vote on the minutes, but can we just talk about correspondence? Because I read through it and I want to just give it back to Betsy.
Okay.
Just briefly, I know. So there was a study done on the wells, an environmental study on the new well, the Holbrook Street site well. And my concern, and you have a picture of that, is here. It's within a half a mile of that wastewater treatment plant that is on the
Placido's
Placido land.
River's
And so
Edge?
that's not a problem.
No, because the state reviews that and look at it, the treatment plant's running properly.
Then it's not a problem.
And they delineated a new zone 2 for that as well.
Okay.
And there's also a very slow-moving pollution going on.
Okay, thank you. So I went over the food permits. The planning board has approved a definitive open space preservation development for Norway Farms. So they're moving forward on that. And, let's see, I think that's all. Everything else we've talked about tonight. Other than, I was hopeful that we could get those signs, 2 signs for tobacco, sale of tobacco products, saying that it's, against the law to sell under 21. And
Yeah, I got them. I gave a bunch to Mark.
thank you. I was going to say, could we
Yeah.
give them to Mark?
Yeah, I ordered
Thank
them.
you. Because the one in Walgreens is upside down over to the side,
Yep, he was
behind the
gonna-
counter. The
He was
one,
doing food inspections, he was gonna distribute them.
and a
so.
couple of other places don't even have them, so that would be great.
Mm.
Hopefully they do now.
I hope so. great, thank you, okay.
Well, if you go back and see that they don't,
Well, Mark, we'll let Mark do it.
well, he should be, but I'm
Give him
just,
a stack of them, so.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Do you want to tentatively set our next meeting for June 19th? Oh, wait a minute, yes, okay, it's me.
shoot.
I don't know if I'm gonna be here.
May,
We
May
do it
20, wait a minute, no. Anytime,
Yeah,
it's not the 26th.
I've got possibly a trip coming up in June,
So do I, at the end of June, I do.
and, yeah,
June, do you know when you're away?
it all depends on what the boatyard is up to.
Okay, you want
They
to
don't
schedule it
know
earlier,
yet.
June 12th?
Yeah, that might
Father's
be
Day?
safer.
It's Father's Day.
Oh, that's a Sunday.
June 12th?
I'm not gonna be on a Sunday, no.
No, just around that year, I might not be around.
June 12th is not.
Oh,
Tuesday.
it's the 17th, I think it's probably the 17th.
It is the 17th.
Father's Day is 17th.
So the 12th, tentatively, until everybody
Yeah.
looks at their calendars?
I have to get back.
All right, tentatively.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
June 12th?